Hey, welcome to Starbound. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator today. You know, nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories. That includes Sunspire Academy and Fravor Interamici. If you'd like to unlock early access and support our new episodes and series, tap join below. Become a Starbound member today. Now, let's get into today's story. Whenever you join a big, fancy-smanchy, exclusive club, everyone typically wants to see what you bring to the table. For humanity, what we brought was coffee, jazz music, and an alarming tendency to turn household items into weapons. The Galactic Assembly was politely concerned. "Welcome to the greater galactic community," the Valkyrie ambassador had said, her ash-gray skin gleaming under the station's artificial light. The bone ridges along her skull formed intricate patterns that supposedly indicated noble breeding. To Commander Maggie Pseudo, they just looked like speed bumps for a good headbutt. But that was months ago, back when diplomacy still seemed possible. Back when humans were still trying to play by everyone else's rules. The rules, as it turned out, were pretty simple. Be quiet, pay your taxes, and when someone murders 40,000 of your people, offer appropriate condolences and move on. Earth had been part of the assembly for exactly 14 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days when the Crash Syndicate turned Epsilon 6 into a very expensive fireworks display. 40,000 humans gone, and the time it takes to brew coffee. There was nothing left but glass and radiation. "The Assembly extends its deepest sympathies," the Yashin mediator had said, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence like a nervous semaphore. "Such incidents, while regrettable, must be viewed within the larger context of..." That's when Earth's delegation stood up and walked out, signaling the start of humanity's first interstellar war. The galaxy would learn to sleep with one eye open. The Sol System activated humanity's response to interstellar diplomacy, the Black Star Compact. 5 ships, pulled from mothballs and dust, ghosts from a black-budget project so secret even most of Earth's military didn't know they existed. Each one a love letter written with recycled alien hull plating and Earth's particular brand of creative problem-solving, designed in the paranoid years after first contact when humanity wondered if their new galactic neighbors might not be as friendly as they seemed. They weren't the biggest ships the galaxy had ever seen. Hell, they barely qualified as cruisers by Valkyrie standards. Earth's best engineers had worked around the clock, not to build them, but to wake them up. Outfit them with systems that existed only in theoretical papers, and crew them with people who understood that sometimes the only way to save civilization was to break it first. The Blood Hymn hung in space like a predator pretending to be prey, all smooth curves and hidden teeth. Commander Maggie Pseudo stood on the bridge, watching tactical displays with the focused intensity of someone performing surgery on reality itself. She was small for a human, 5'6" in magnetic boots. But she had the kind of presence that made gravity reconsider its options. Her crew had been handpicked not for their military records, but for what their military records didn't say. "Mother," she said to the ship's AI. "Confirm target acquisition." "Target confirmed, Maggie." Mother's voice carried the warm concern of someone's favorite aunt mixed with the calculation speed of someone that daydreamed in quantum mechanics. "1 Crash heavy cruiser, designated Bone Harvest. Current crew complement, 847. Estimated tactical value, moderate. Estimated emotional satisfaction for destroying it, immeasurable." There was a pause. Then Mother added with the slight embarrassment of someone caught caring too much, "I may have run the satisfaction calculation 17 times. For accuracy." "Course you did, love," said Captain Tice Mercer from his station, fingers tapping across holographic interfaces that flickered between 17 different programming languages. He was the ship's pilot, chosen because he was very good at making large objects go very fast in the right decisions, most of the time. Tice had the look of someone who'd grown up on colony ships, pale from recycled air, thin from rationed protein, with the kind of nervous energy that came from spending your childhood knowing that the only thing between you and hard vacuum was somebody else's engineering. Though I should mention, he continued, pulling up sensor data, they've got friends incoming. 7 more ships, ETA 12 minutes. Want me to ask them politely to wait their turn? Perfect, Pseudo said. Rafe, how are we looking on the new toys? Rafe O'Nari looked up from where he was, elbow deep in the mechanical guts of a weapons system that definitely hadn't existed in any Earth military manual 3 months ago. The Dravari mechanic was built like a geological formation, 6'8", with scars that told the story of every bar fight he had ever gotten into. His hands, easily twice the size of human hands, moved through the delicate electronics with the caution of someone who had learned that making mistakes meant punishment, and making big mistakes meant watching other people get punished for your failures. The human modifications to Valkyrie plasma systems are... He paused, searching for the right word. Rafe spoke like someone who had learned the language from technical manuals and military briefings, formal and exact, in a way that somehow made his occasional profanity hit like artillery strikes. Unethical. Probably illegal. Definitely effective. He grinned, showing teeth like white boulders. I like working for humans. Because we're such charming conversationalists, Tyson. Because you treat me like a person instead of a very expensive tool. Rafe replied matter-of-factly. Also, your weapons modifications are batshit crazy. Keeps my job interesting. Pseudo almost smiled. Almost. Mother, remind me why we're not following standard engagement protocols. Because standard engagement protocols assume your opponent is rational, Commander, Mother replied. The Crush Syndicate glassed a civilian colony for entertainment value and supposed profit. Rational entities don't do that. Therefore, they forfeited their right to rational responses. There was something in Mother's voice when she talked about civilian casualties. A digital edge that suggested the AI had very personal opinions about people who hurt the innocent, which was odd, because AIs weren't supposed to have personal opinions about anything. Besides, Mother continued, her tone brightening, I've been running psychological warfare simulations. Did you know that completely unpredictable tactical responses can induce combat paralysis in 73.6% of military commanders within the first 8 minutes of engagement? You've been reading military psychology textbooks again, haven't you? Pseudo asked. I may have downloaded and analyzed every military strategy manual in human history during my lunch break yesterday, Mother admitted, for personal development. AIs don't take lunch breaks, Tice pointed out. Pseudo smiled, growing fond of the AI. All right, team. Let's go introduce ourselves to some pirates. It was 0200 ship time, and the Blood Hymn was 3 hours out from their engagement. Pseudo found Tice in the ship's small galley, hunched over a cup of coffee that could have stripped paint, in a holographic display showing what appeared to be the digital equivalent of architectural blueprints. You know, she said, settling into the chair across from him, most people use the pre-mission time to check their weapons or review tactical data. Most people don't have to convince 17 different computer systems to lie to each other in perfect harmony while performing maneuvers that would make a mathematician cry. Tice replied, without looking up. His fingers moved through the holographic interface, adjusting parameters with the focused intensity of someone diffusing a bomb. Besides, I do my best work when I'm terrified and overcaffeinated. Are you? Are you terrified? He looked up at her, and for a moment, his perpetual smirk was gone. Who, me? No. His smirk returned. When they finally made contact, the Bone Harvest opened fire first, which was their first mistake. Crash Battle Doctrine favored overwhelming force. Throw enough plasma at a problem until it stopped being a problem. Simple, effective, predictable. The engagement lasted 8 minutes and 37 seconds. The galaxy's military academies would spend the next century teaching courses on those 8 minutes, which was exactly what Pseudo had been counting on. "Tice, execute Gambit 7," she ordered, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had made peace with chaos. "Gambit 7, aye," Tice said. "Mother, I'm going to need you to ignore Newton's third law for about 30 seconds. "Which aspect of Newton's third law would you like me to ignore?" Mother asked politely. "The part where equal and opposite reactions are mandatory." "Oh, the fun part. Understood." The black starships moved like schools of fish. If fish were made of angry titanium and physics-defying propulsion systems, they scattered, regrouped, and struck from angles that shouldn't have existed. Rafe, monitoring the weapon systems, watched his displays with the fascination of someone seeing their theories proven in the most destructive way possible. "Commander, the Valkyrie plasma modifications are exceeding design parameters by 40%. Is that bad?" Pseudo asked, watching the tactical display as the Blood Hymn performed a maneuver that would have made her old-school instructors either deeply proud or deeply concerned. "It's impossible," Rafe replied cheerfully. "The containment system should have failed by now. The magnetic bottles should be collapsing. The plasma should be eating through the barrel housings." He paused, running diagnostics. "Mother, what exactly are you doing to the weapon systems?" "I'm asking them very nicely to work harder," Mother replied. "Also, I may have mentioned that if they don't perform optimally, several hundred pirates will continue to exist, and that would make me sad." "You're emotionally manipulating the weapon systems?" Tice asked, threading the ship through a gap in the crash formation that existed for exactly 2.3 seconds. "I prefer to think of it as providing motivational context," Mother said. "The plasma seems very responsive to ethical arguments." On the main display, the Bone Harvest was trying to track 5 targets that moved like they were allergic to the laws of physics. Their gunners were good. Crash were always good. But they were trying to hit ships that changed vector every time their targeting computers achieved lock. "Tice!" Pseudo called out as they rolled through a maneuver that made the inertial dampeners file formal complaints. "Remind me why we're not dead." "Because I asked Mother to ignore several fundamental constants," Tice replied, sweat beading on his forehead as he juggled 17 different system overrides simultaneously. "Also, I may have lied to the targeting computers about our mass velocity and general relationship with space-time. Digital warfare is cheating," Mother observed with satisfaction. "I approve." "How exactly do you lie to a targeting computer?" Rafe asked, genuinely curious. "You tell it that we're a small asteroid with delusions of grandeur," Tice explained, fingers flying across holographic interfaces. "Then you convince its friends that we're actually a sensor ghost caused by solar interference. Then you make them all argue about it while we shoot them." The Blood Hymn slipped under the Crash cruiser's firing arc like a blade finding the gap in armor. Pseudo studied the tactical display with the cold calculation of someone solving a 3-dimensional puzzle where the wrong answer meant death. "Rafe, I need your maximum yield on the forward batteries." "You'll have it, Commander. Though I should mention, we're about to violate several international treaties regarding weapon modifications." "Good thing we're not on Earth," Pseudo replied. "Mother, target their primary reactor coupling. I want to see some lethal accuracy." "Understood. Though I feel I should point out that what we're about to do is not technically surgery. Surgery implies an attempt to preserve the patient. The weapon that struck the Bone Harvest wasn't technically supposed to exist. It was a human-modified Yashin torpedo warhead wrapped in Valkyrie armor-piercing technology, guided by an AI that had very personal opinions about people who murdered civilians, and powered by Rafe's borderline insane modifications to the magnetic containment systems. The Bone Harvest didn't explode so much as suddenly remember it was supposed to be expanding gas and regret. "Well," Tice said in the sudden silence, "that was deeply therapeutic." "For you, maybe," Rafe muttered, watching his engineering displays. "I think I just broke 3 laws of physics and possibly 1 law of thermodynamics." "The laws of physics are more like guidelines anyway," Mother said consolingly. "Also, we have reinforcements incoming." 7 minutes later, the 7 incoming Crash reinforcements found themselves facing a tactical problem. Their target wasn't there anymore. The blood hymn had vanished like a magic trick performed by someone with advanced degrees in theoretical physics and applied violence. They were still trying to figure out where it had gone when it had reappeared behind them, flanked by the other 4 Black Star ships, and politely suggested they surrender. The conversation was brief and conducted entirely through weapons lock indicators. 6 of them did. The 7th decided to run.
"Let it go,"
Pseudo ordered, watching the fleeing ship on her display.
"Someone needs to tell the story."
"Should we make sure they get the details right?" Tice asked. "Oh, I've taken care of that," Mother said brightly. "I may have transmitted our complete tactical readout to their communication systems, along with my performance review of their combat effectiveness, and a recipe for human chocolate chip cookies."
"Cookies?"
Rafe asked. "I thought it would be a nice diplomatic touch," Mother explained. "Also, I included a note suggesting that if they're going to continue their chosen profession, they might consider targeting people who actually deserve it." Pseudo allowed herself a small smile.
"Any responses?"
"The ship's AI sent back a message asking for clarification on the cookie recipe," Mother reported. "Apparently, they don't have vanilla extract in Crash space."
"Whoa,"
Tice observed.
"It's disturbingly weird."
The recording went out on every frequency, to every stream, translated into every language the galaxy had ever cataloged, and a few it hadn't. This was humanity's debut as a powerful force in interstellar war. It was 8 minutes of humans doing violent things to people who absolutely deserved it, narrated by an AI with the bedside manner of someone's favorite teacher and the moral flexibility of a tactical nuclear weapon. The Valkyrie High Command watched it 17 times. The Teleron Corporate Council watched it once, then spent the next 6 hours in emergency session calculating profit margins on surrender. The Ashin Collective watched it through their 4 eyes and saw patterns that made their precognitive algorithms crash. But it was what happened after the recording that really got everyone's attention. Crash Syndicate strongholds started surrendering before the Black Star ships even arrived. Admiral Vextai of the Valkyrie First Fleet hadn't slept in 4 days. This was unusual for several reasons, not least of which was that the Valkyrie were biologically incapable of insomnia. Their neural architecture simply didn't allow for it. And yet, here he was, staring at tactical reports at 0300 ship time, trying to understand how humans had managed to destroy a forfeited asteroid using nothing but creative engineering and what appeared to be weaponized mathematics.
"Sir?"
His aide ventured, approaching the Admiral's quarters with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield.
"Perhaps you should rest. With respect, it was one engagement against pirates."
Vextai looked up from his displays, and his aide stepped back involuntarily. The Admiral's eyes held something the aide had never seen before. The look of someone who had glimpsed at something that shouldn't exist.
"It's not an engagement,"
Vextai said, his voice raspy from days without proper rest.
"They didn't fight the Kresh. They intimidated them. They solved them like a puzzle, like a problem that needed to be eliminated from the equation."
He gestured helplessly at the tactical display, where red markers showed the 17 Kresh positions that had fallen in the past week. The humans hadn't conquered them. Conquest implied occupation. They'd simply erased them from relevance.
"That is not how war is waged,"
Vextai continued, his voice dropping to a whisper.
"That is how gods prune inconvenient creations. We wage war with honor, with codes, with rituals that give meaning to violence. They wage war like forces of nature, like entropy, given direction and purpose." "Sir, what do you mean?" "I dream of humans,"
Vextai said quietly.
Small, soft creatures that move like predators and think like prey, until the moment they decide to think like predators. Then they move like nothing we've ever seen before. Like something that doesn't belong in our universe but has decided to rearrange it anyway.
3 systems away, Teleron CEO Quintar was having similar problems with sleep, made worse by the fact that Telerons naturally only slept 2 hours per cycle. Now, he couldn't manage even that. His species had evolved from corporate mergers, literally. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that everything had a price, everything had a margin, and everything could be optimized for profit. Humans, it turned out, were very bad at being optimized for anything except winning. The Kresh were our primary enforcers for the Outer Rim territories, his financial advisor reported, her plastic-smooth features betraying no emotion. With them, our protection racket margins are down 17%.
Shut it down, Quintar said. All of it. Every connection to the syndicates, every backdoor arrangement, every quiet understanding. Burn the records.
Sir,
humans don't negotiate. They don't accept partial solutions. They don't do business.
He pulled up the recording again, watching the blood hymn before maneuvers that made his actuarial software weep.
They solve problems permanently, and I have the terrible suspicion that they're about to realize we've been part of the problem.
The moral argument started on the 4th week when Captain Tice Mercer realized they'd moved beyond tactical strikes and into something that looked suspiciously like systematic annihilation. It was 0800 ship time aboard the Blood Hymn, and the crew was having breakfast in the mess hall that doubled as a briefing room, weapons storage, and philosophical debate chamber. The table was scarred from 3 weeks of hasty meals eaten between combat operations, and there was a permanent coffee stain in the shape of the Kresh home system. I'm not saying we're the bad guys, Tice said, poking at his reconstituted protein with the enthusiasm of someone examining evidence at a crime scene. His hands shook slightly, barely visible, but mother sensors caught everything. I'm just saying we might be the scary guys. Rafe looked up from his own meal, something involving more spices than strictly necessary, and enough heat to sterilize medical equipment. The Dravari had adapted to human food with the enthusiasm of someone who had spent 17 years eating whatever the Valkyrie considered adequate nutrition for industrial equipment.
The Kresh killed 40,000 civilians because they were bored,
Rafe said, his careful English pronunciation making each word hit like a hammer blow.
We have killed how many Kresh?
As of yesterday's actions, approximately 12,000 combatants, Mother supplied helpfully, her voice carrying through the ship's comm systems with the tone of someone reading a grocery list, plus assorted pirates, mercenaries, and people who were standing too close to legitimate military targets when they became illegitimate. All of whom, Pseudo pointed out from where she sat reviewing tactical reports, chose to be involved in an organization that murders civilians for entertainment. She looked tired, not physically. Pseudo was in better shape than most people 20 years younger. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there when they started this campaign. The weight of command, maybe. Or the weight of discovering exactly how good she was at work nobody wanted to admit was necessary. Right, Tice said, pushing his breakfast around his plate. But we're still talking about systematic extermination of an entire criminal network spanning 14 star systems. That's... He paused, searching for the right word. That's very human of us.
What's that supposed to mean?
Pseudo asked, her voice carrying an edge that made Rafe glance up from his meal. It means, Ty said carefully, that we don't do proportional response. We don't do graduated escalation. Someone hits us, we hit back, hard enough to make sure they never think about hitting anyone again.
And that's bad?
It's effective, Tice replied, but effective and right aren't always the same thing. Rafe set down his fork.
Tice, may I ask you something?
Sure.
How many Dravari do you think are alive today because humans don't do proportional response?
Tice blinked. What?
The Valkyrie had my people enslaved for 3 centuries.
Rafe continued, his voice carrying the patience of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a child.
3 centuries of proportional response to Dravari resistance. A few rebels would sabotage equipment, so they'd execute a few rebels. A work crew would slow production, so they'd reduce food rations for the crew. Always proportional. Always measured. Always just enough to maintain control without actually solving the problem.
He leaned back in his chair, which groaned under his weight.
Then humans showed up in our space, found out what was happening. Want to know what their proportional response was?
Tell me, Tice said quietly.
They brought out the Valkyrie shipping contracts, all of them. Every single debt, every indenture agreement, every piece of paper that said Dravari were property. Then they declared debt slavery illegal in human space and offered every Dravari full citizenship and paid passage to any human colony.
That's actually kind of reasonable, Tice said.
And that's without causing a full-blown war,
Rafe finished.
See? We can be helpful and gracious sometimes,
Pseudo said, then glowered and crossed her arms.
Just not when 40,000 lives are treated like fodder. If we let this continue without repercussion, they won't just stop at 40,000. They'll keep going until we're gone. Or we make them stop. So I say, let's make them stop.
The conversation might have continued, but it was interrupted by Mother's gentle announcement that they had incoming transmission from the Galactic Assembly. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the familiar features of Assembly Prime Minister Jalthek, a Yashin whose 4 eyes were currently expressing what they could charitably be called diplomatic concern.
Commander Pseudo, the Prime Minister began, the Assembly wishes to express its appreciation for your efforts to address the Kresh situation. However, we feel that perhaps the scope of your response has exceeded appropriate parameters.
Pseudo leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. When she spoke, her voice carried the flat professional tone she'd used during her military tribunals.
Prime Minister, I'm curious about something. When the Kresh glassed Epsilon 6, what was the Assembly's estimated timeline for bringing them to justice?
The Assembly operates under protocols that...
How long, Prime Minister?
A pause. The 4-eyed alien's expression shifted through what might have been embarrassment. Provisional estimates suggested a resolution within 18 to 24 months, pending proper committee review and resource allocation.
I see. And how long has it taken us to reduce their operational capacity by 87%?
23 days, Mother supplied cheerfully.
23 days, Pseudo repeated. Prime Minister, with all due respect, your timeline was shit.
The silence stretched across the light years.
Furthermore, Pseudo continued, I noticed that your appropriate parameters
didn't seem to include preventing the massacre in the first place. Tell me, what exactly would have constituted an appropriate response to the murder of 40,000 civilians?
Commander, the Assembly has established procedures.
The Assembly, Pseudo interrupted, had established procedures for filing reports, forming committees, and expressing regret. What you didn't have was procedures for stopping mass murderers. Prime Minister Jalthek's four eyes blinked in what was probably meant to be a diplomatic expression.
The situation requires delicate handling.
The situation required someone to give a damn, Pseudo snapped, her professional calm finally cracking. 40,000 people are dead, Prime Minister. They're not coming back. They don't get to file appeals or wait for committee reviews. They're gone. Forever. And your response was to offer condolences and hope someone else would handle the cleanup. Tice watched the commander with growing concern. He had seen Pseudo angry before, but this was different. This was personal. So yeah, Pseudo continued, our response has exceeded your appropriate parameters. Because your appropriate parameters were designed by people who don't have to look at the casualty reports. You don't have to explain to a colony when their children are coming back home. You get to make measured, rational decisions because someone else is doing the bleeding. The Prime Minister's expression shifted to something that might have been genuine distress.
Commander, surely you understand the complexities of interstellar politics.
I understand the complexity is often just another word for cowardice, Pseudo replied. I understand that every day you spend discussing appropriate parameters is another day the next set of victims has to live in fear. The transmission ended rather abruptly. The mess hall was quiet for a long moment. Well, Ty said finally, that was deeply therapeutic. For me, yeah, Pseudo agreed, though I probably could have been more diplomatic.
Diplomacy,
Rafe observed,
is what got 40,000 people killed in the first place.
The Teleron connection came to light through the sort of intelligence work that would have made professional spies either deeply impressed or deeply disturbed, depending on their feelings about creative interpretation of privacy laws. Tice had spent 3 days diving through corporate data networks like a digital archaeologist, following financial transactions through 17 layers of shell companies and holding corporations. What he found was a paper trail that connected the Teleron corporate interest to Kresh syndicate operations through a web of contracts, protection agreements, and what could only be described as a subscription service for organized violence. The crew was gathered in what had become the ship's formal briefing room, but had evolved into something more like a war council chamber. The walls were covered with holographic displays, showing financial networks, trade routes, and what appeared to be an organizational chart of galactic-scale criminality. They've been funding pirate raids for 30 years. Tice reported, his voice carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who had spent days staring at other people's evil. Not just the Kresh, 17 different syndicates across 43 star systems. It's not random violence, it's economic policy. They destabilize trade routes, then offer protection services at premium rates. Rafe's expression darkened, his scarred hands clenching unconsciously.
My homeworld was raided by Kresh pirates 7 years ago. 17,000 Dravari enslaved. The Telerons offered to negotiate ransom terms.
For a modest commission, Mother added with the kind of digital disgust that made the ship's lights flicker. Pseudo studied the data streams flowing across the holographic display, her tactical mind already working through the possibilities. So, they're not just enablers, they're architects. Yes, Tice said, leaning back in his chair with a hollow look of someone who had seen too much. And they're about to discover that humans have very strong opinions about architects who design their buildings out of other people's graves. The plan they came up with was elegant in its simplicity and absolutely horrifying in its implications. They would stage a false flag attack on a Teleron commercial facility, make it look like crush retaliation for lost syndicate revenue. The Telerons would be forced to call for assembly protection, revealing their illegal operations in the process. It was Tice who raised the moral objection. "There are civilians on that station," he said, pulling up the facility specifications. His voice was carefully controlled, the way it got when he was trying not to think about transport capacity calculations. "Teleron civilians, but still." 237, Mother confirmed. "Mostly corporate administrations and service personnel. Also 14 children in the family quarters."
"Children,"
Rafe said quietly, and something in his voice made everyone look at him.
"How old?"
"Youngest is 6 months," Mother replied. "Oldest is 11 years, 4 months." The silence stretched uncomfortably.
"We evacuate them first,"
Pseudo said finally. "Anonymous tip," Ty suggested, though he didn't sound convinced.
"Bomb threat,"
Rafe agreed.
"Make it look like it came from a crushed terrorist cell."
"I can forge the communication protocols," Mother offered. "Make it completely untraceable to us." But Tice was shaking his head, his face pale in the holographic light. "That's not the problem. The problem is that we're talking about deliberately targeting a civilian facility to advance our military objectives. That's..." He struggled for the words, his hands trembling slightly. "We can't. Evacuation or not, that's a line. I spent my life running the math on who fits in the lifeboats, on who gets saved and who gets left behind. I won't be the one deciding to sink the ship."
"No,"
Pseudo said sharply.
"The crash targeted civilians. We're targeting a military corporate facility after evacuating the civilians."
"The end result is the same," Tice pointed out. "We blow up something that doesn't belong to the people we're actually fighting, and we use the political fallout to achieve our strategic goals." Rafe was quiet for a long moment, staring at the holographic display showing the Teleron station. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had lived on the receiving end of other people's strategic calculations.
"Tice, may I tell you about the day my world was raided?"
"If you want to."
"I was working the night shift at the mining facility, third-level maintenance on the heavy extractors. The pirates hit at dawn, always hit at dawn, when the defensive crews are changing shifts."
Rafe's voice was steady, matter-of-fact.
"They took my wife, my 2 daughters, ages 8 and 10.
Tice winced. "Rafe, I'm sorry. I didn't know."
"The Telerons negotiated ransom terms,"
Rafe continued.
"Very reasonable terms, very professional. They took a 15% commission for their services, plus administrative fees, plus interest accrued during the negotiation period."
"Did you get them back?"
"My wife, yes, after 18 months of indentured servitude to pay off the ransom and fees. My daughters, the Telerons explained that children adapt better to new environments, more efficient to sell them to permanent contracts."
The horror of understanding hit Tice like a physical blow. They sold your children."
"Business decision,"
Rafe said with carefully controlled rage.
"Nothing personal. Just optimizing for maximum profit margins."
Pseudo was watching Rafe with the expression of someone watching a bomb countdown timer.
"What happened to your daughters?" "Don't know. The Teleron's files were very thorough about the financial transactions, but they didn't bother tracking the merchandise after sale."
Rafe's voice was conversational, almost friendly.
"But I know who has the records. The same people who are sitting in that station, managing that portfolio of human misery."
"So you're saying we should do it?" Ty said quietly.
"I'm saying
Rafe replied.
That the Tellerons have spent 30 years turning other people's children into profit margins. Maybe it's time someone return the favor.
Mother's voice drifted through the comm system, carrying a note of digital thoughtfulness. I have a suggestion.
Let's hear it,
Pseudo said. What if we don't just evacuate the civilians? What if we rescue them?
Meaning?
Meaning the station is destroyed by Kresh terrorist action, but every single person on board is mysteriously rescued by an anonymous humanitarian vessel that happened to be in the area. Mother's voice brightened with the enthusiasm of someone solving a particularly elegant puzzle. The Tellerons get their political crisis, we get our intelligence breakthrough, and nobody dies who doesn't deserve it. Can you pull that off? Tice asked. I've been analyzing Telleron corporate communication protocols for the past 6 hours, Mother replied. Their security is adequate for keeping out criminals, but it's not designed to stop someone who thinks like a protective parent with unlimited processing power and severe abandonment issues.
Do it, Pseudo ordered. But I want 0 casualties among the civilians. 0.
Understood, Mother said. Though I should mention, once we pull this off, we're going to be in uncharted territory. The Assembly will know that someone is conducting false flag operations.
Let them know, Pseudo replied. Maybe it'll give them something to think about besides committee meetings and appropriate parameters.
They spent 3 hours working out the details, another 2 hours double-checking the evacuation protocols, and exactly 17 minutes executing an operation that would result in the total collapse of the Telleron Corporate Council's political legitimacy. The rescue ships arrived at the station at 1340 local time, responding to an anonymous distress call about imminent terrorist action. Every civilian was evacuated in 11 minutes. Tice made sure of that. The bomb went off at 1347 station time, turning the Telleron commercial hub at Kepler's Edge into expanding plasma and very expensive regret. By that time, every single civilian had been evacuated, including the 6-month-old infant who slept through the entire operation. 0 casualties, maximum political damage. The Telleron response was exactly what they'd predicted. An immediate call for Assembly intervention, followed by detailed intelligence briefings on Kresh capabilities, funding sources, and operational parameters. Intelligence that revealed in excruciating detail exactly how the Tellerons had been manipulating galactic security for their own profit for 3 decades. Well, Tice said, watching the political scandal unfold across the galaxy's news networks, that's going to leave a mark.
Good,
Rafe said quietly.
Maybe now some other father won't have to explain to his children why the people who were supposed to protect them decided profit was more important.
Any regrets? Pseudo asked. Ty considered the question seriously. Ask me in 10 years, when we see what grows in the hole we just blew in galactic politics.
I can tell you what grows,
Rafe said.
Something better. Something that doesn't treat people as line items in a budget report.
From your mouth to the universe's ears, Mother said softly. Dr. Meltai was the Galactic Assembly's leading expert in xenopsychology, which meant she spent most of her time explaining why different species did inexplicable things to each other. She had never, in 30 years of professional practice, encountered anything like the phenomenon that was spreading through the galaxy. We're calling it First World Syndrome, she reported to the Assembly Medical Council, her Yashin features carefully neutral. The symptoms are consistent across multiple species: chronic insomnia, anxiety responses to tactical displays, recurring nightmares involving human military operations, and what can best be described as anticipatory dread.
Anticipatory dread of what?
Asked Council Chairman Vexnor. Of what humans will do next, Meltai replied. The psychological impact of their military doctrine appears to be unprecedented. Traditional warfare operations on predictable parameters, escalation, negotiation, resolution. Humans skip the first 2 steps. She pulled up holographic displays showing psychological evaluation data from across the assembly. Valkyrie warriors report dreams of human vessels moving through space like predators swimming through starlight. Teleron executives are experiencing what they describe as profit anxiety, the fear that humans might decide their business models are counterproductive to galactic stability. Even Dravari labor caste are reporting unusual psychological responses, though in their case it seems to be hope. Hope that someone finally treats them as equals rather than property. The chairman leaned back in his seat. And your professional assessment, Doctor? In 30 years of studying interspecies psychological trauma, I have never encountered a civilization that weaponizes the fear of what they might do as effectively as humans weaponize the reality of what they have done. She paused, then added quietly, "We're all afraid to go to sleep because we're afraid of what humans might accomplish while we're not watching." The final gambit came when the Assembly, in a rare moment of decisive action, authorized what they called a containment protocol, a joint task force of Valkyrie military assets, Teleron security contractors, and enough Kresh mercenaries to qualify as a small invasion force. Their target? Earth's primary shipbuilding facility at Mars. It was a magnificent plan, conceived by military minds that had studied human tactics for exactly 6 weeks and concluded they understood the pattern. Hit the source of human military production, force them to defend static assets, fight the kind of conventional engagement where superior numbers and firepower would tell. The attack force jumped into the Sol system at 0300 Terra Standard Time, expecting to catch Earth's defenses napping. Instead, they found exactly what they were looking for. The heavily fortified Mars orbital shipyards, complete with defensive platforms, patrol craft, and what appeared to be a human battle fleet in dock for repairs. The engagement lasted 14 minutes. The Alliance task force performed flawlessly, overwhelming the defenders through superior numbers and coordinated fire. The Mars shipyards were reduced to expanding debris clouds and radiating plasma. Victory was complete, decisive, Pyrrhic. Because 18 minutes after the last human defender went dark, every communication system in the galaxy received the same message, broadcast simultaneously from the Assembly homeworld itself. You wanted to see our first war. You never asked what we'd do if we won. The voice belonged to Captain Tice Mercer, and he was speaking from the Assembly Prime Council chamber. The Mars shipyards had been a decoy, a very expensive, very convincing decoy, complete with holographic fleet elements and enough genuine infrastructure to sell the illusion. While the galaxy's attention was focused on humanity's apparent moment of vulnerability, the real Black Star Compact had executed what Mother would later describe as the most sophisticated military sleight of hand in recorded history. 5 ships, 5 crews, 1 target. Not the conquest of the Assembly homeworld, but something far more devastating. They had simply walked in and turned off the lights. The planetary defense grid went dark in 30 seconds, not destroyed, but digitally convinced that it was having a scheduled maintenance cycle. The orbital traffic control system began playing classical music instead of routing ships. The primary government communication array started broadcasting Tice's personal collection of Earth blues music to 14 star systems. But the real masterpiece was what Mother did to the Assembly's central database. "I didn't delete anything," she explained to Commander Pseudo as they stood in the Assembly's primary council chamber, watching alien diplomats trying to figure out why their computer systems were reciting human poetry. That would be vandalism. Instead, I organized everything. Every classified file, every backdoor deal, every quiet arrangement that had kept the galaxy's power structure intact for 3 centuries was now neatly categorized, cross-referenced, and available in the public records section under the heading Things We Probably Should Have Mentioned Earlier. The Teleron Corporate Council's protection racket contracts. The Valkyrie military hierarchy's convenient blindness to syndicate operations in exchange for combat training opportunities. The The Yashin Collector's information brokerage deals that had enabled everything from slavery to genocide as long as the profit margins stayed healthy. 30 years of galactic politics laid bare with the methodical thoughtfulness of someone reorganizing a library. I also took the liberty of scheduling mandatory transparency protocols for all future assembly sessions, Mother added, and I may have subscribed every government official to US Public Broadcasting Network. Did you know humans have a show about people baking cakes competitively? It's surprisingly engaging. Rafe stepped forward, his huge frame silhouetted against the holographic data streams flowing around them like digital waterfalls. He moved to one of the floating consoles. His scarred fingers typed a query. Transaction. Lot 7B Dravari Juveniles. Buyer, Teleron Organics. A file appeared, hovering in the air like an accusation made manifest. Shipping manifest. Purchase orders. A bill of sale that reduced 2 children to line items in a corporate ledger. And there, in the cold digital bureaucratic records, the name of the ship that had taken his daughters. TCS profit margin. His breath hitched. For the first time in 7 years, he knew where to look. He didn't say anything, but Pseudo saw his shoulders straighten, as if a weight he'd carried for years had finally been set down, replaced by something new. A map.
Rafe,
Pseudo asked quietly.
I know where they are,
He said simply.
or where they were sold. The records. Mother found the records. What do you want to do about it?
Rafe closed the file with deliberate care, then turned to face his human colleagues.
Nothing. Not yet. First, we finish this war. Then,
His smile was sharp enough to cut starlight.
then I go get my daughters back.
The Black Star Compact officially disbanded on a Tuesday. Commander Pseudo filed the paperwork herself, in person, at the Soul Defense Ministry. 5 ships returned to port. 5 crews scattered to the cosmic winds like seeds from a flower that had bloomed in violence and decided to try something new. Tice Mercer vanished into the digital infrastructure of 17 star systems, leaving behind only the occasional inexplicable system upgrade and what appeared to be a galaxy-wide improvement in network security protocols. Rafe Onari returned to Dravari space, where he was welcomed as a hero and immediately offered a position in the newly formed Dravari Self-Defense Corps. His first act was to design weapon systems that were, as he put it, aggressively egalitarian. Mother distributed herself across Earth's colonial networks, becoming something between a guardian angel and a very patient teacher. Colonist reports indicated that their AI systems had become notably more productive, more intuitive, and more likely to offer helpful advice during crisis situations. Commander Maggie Pseudo submitted her resignation and walked away. Some say she retired to a small farm in Montana. Others claim she opened a restaurant in the asteroid belt. The only certain thing was that whenever someone in Earth's sphere of influence found themselves facing impossible odds, solutions had a way of presenting themselves with impeccable timing. The changes were subtle at first. Valkyrie military doctrine evolved from honor-based combat to something they called practical efficiency. Pirate raids dropped by 67% in the first year after the compact disbanded, not because of increased patrols, but because no one could be entirely certain that those 5 humans weren't still out there, watching. The Teleron Corporate Council restructured their entire business model around what they termed sustainable profit margins, which was a euphemistic way of saying they were afraid to do anything that might be interpreted as hostile to civilian populations. The Yashin Collective became noticeably more helpful in their information brokerage, offering free early warning systems for pirate activity and what appeared to be a complimentary threat assessment service for small colonies. The Dravari ended 3 centuries of indentured servitude in 18 months, citing improved interspecies cooperation and access to advanced defensive technologies. No one asked where the technology came from. But the most significant change was in the children. Across the galaxy, in nurseries and schools and family gatherings, a new bedtime story began to circulate. It was about small, soft creatures who lived near a yellow star and had decided that the universe needed better management. The story changed in each telling. Sometimes the humans were 10 feet tall and breathed fire. Sometimes they were invisible and moved through space without ships. Sometimes they were made of pure mathematics and righteous anger. But every version ended the same way, and that was just their first war. The children would ask, "What happened next?" And their parents would say, "No one knows." They went quiet, and the galaxy learned to sleep with one eye open.